Hey everybody, I'm Mike Settele, and in this video I hope to answer the question, what's next now that December 2023 scores have been released? What should you do now with those scores so that you can move on with your life? Well, if you're a senior, it's probably an easy decision. You have no more SATs that you can probably take for most colleges, so you're just done with the SAT. The big decision is whether you send those scores to colleges. And if you got exactly the number that you needed, great. If you didn't do quite as well, you might be debating what you should do. My general advice is that you should send your scores to colleges where you are either in their range or above it. Now, you should also send the scores if you have a generally high percentile. This mostly applies to the most competitive schools where the range is insane. It's like 1520 to 1600. That's amazing, but many people have really good scores but don't quite hit that range because that's a very, very narrow window to get for some of these top schools. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't send the score. If you're at like a 1450, you might be below the range for Johns Hopkins or whatever, that's where I went, but it still is a great score. You have a high percentile, you should send that. Those ranges have been skewed over years with COVID and test optional schools, so it doesn't really reflect what a good score is anymore. So if you have a generally high percentile, I recommend that you send it. And remember, you can super score. So if you've taken the test multiple times, these colleges, most of them are going to take your best reading and your best math and combine them to get an overall best score. So your numbers may be higher than any particular test suggests. But let's talk about juniors, because you are the guys who are now starting this process and you want to make the most of the time you've got left. So my biggest recommendation is that you should take the March 9th SAT. If that's internationally, that's in the US, that is the number one I suggest. Some of you may also, if you are in the United States, your high school might offer an in-school SAT. That can happen anywhere between March and April. You should start asking, when is that test going to be, if it's going to happen. The reason I don't love those in-school tests is that a lot of times they fall into kind of just like weird scheduling times, maybe like right after spring break, and that's not a good time to be taking an SAT when you've been out of school for 2 weeks and maybe you're on vacation or visiting colleges and you haven't really been thinking and studying about the SAT. So make sure that you are planning ahead, because basically what you want to do is whenever you take the test, you want to have 2 months to really devote time to prep. So for those March 9th SAT testers, you want to start studying in January. And that way too, if you take the March SAT, you can kind of be done with the SAT for the rest of the school year when APs and finals start to hit in May and June. You don't want to be worrying about the SAT on top of all that. So that March 9th date is my favorite because it kind of gets out of the way before school really gets intense at the end of the year. But no matter what, make a plan, because there's only so many times the test is offered and you need to have a plan and a schedule to stick to. And if you are going to take the March SAT, don't just plan that out and register for the test. Make sure you also plan out when you're going to study each week so that you have a set time. Even if you're not taking a class or having a tutor, just make a time when you can sit down and do some studying. It's really helpful if you can find someone to kind of be accountable with, and so you can both kind of either study together or at least study at the same time. And it's good if you have someone either through a friend or just some sort of social media network that you can work with and kind of just hold yourselves accountable. But no matter what, do not waste the digital practice tests. I have lots of videos warning you about how important these practice tests are and how easy it is to spoil them. So please make sure you watch those before you dive into that Blue Book app, before you look at any other College Board resource. It's very important you understand how these practice tests are going to fit into your prep. And so let me give you just a rough idea of what that schedule should look like. First, right now, if you got scores back, whether it's your SATs from the December test or your PSATs, you should look at those and try to understand what they mean. I've got videos about interpreting that knowledge and skills section so you can kind of figure out where you might have some weaknesses that you can already start to work on. Then learn the strategies. Don't take another practice test. You've got starting scores. You know what you're good at. You know what you need to work on. Learn the overall strategies. I have a 10-episode playlist that goes through the main strategies for each section, and that way you can kind of learn some new things before you dive into the next practice test, and you only need to take that about halfway through. So probably like the middle of February, you can take that next practice test. And then when you do, you have to review it very thoroughly. I've got lessons on that, and you can also then start to target your weaknesses. What kinds of topics did you struggle with? Grammar, algebra, geometry, whatever it may be, you need to really work on that. And there are some resources that I can point out and point you to that will help you with those specific weaknesses. And only when you've gone through and kind of covered all the things you struggled with in that first practice test can you take a second practice test. Usually that is the week or two before your actual exam date. So this whole process only needs to take about 8 weeks total. You don't need to be studying every single day from now until your SAT date. You can spread it out. I'd rather you have breathing room so the new information can sink in and you can practice things without feeling overwhelmed by all the topics that are on the test. So if you are looking to target that March 9th test date, then you need to be started with a plan by January 13th. So you've got some time to think about it, but you really want to start to put that together. Please make sure if you've got questions about how that's going to look, put some comments in here. I'm happy to help you and guide you. You should also check out both my YouTube channel and my website for lots of great resources and information about the best way to prep for the test. I think I have especially great resources when it comes to reviewing those practice tests. I've got an individual video for every single question from one of the official exams, so you can learn not just how to solve it, but how to solve it more efficiently using new strategies. The new strategies are the key. If you keep using the old strategies, you're going to keep getting the old scores. So you need new ways to think about all this stuff. So hopefully that is a lot to think about already, but please ask if you've got questions. You can feel free to comment in this video. And then again, like I said, check out some of the other videos I've got on the homepage of my channel. A lot of great questions that I'm going to answer just about how this overall process works. So I hope I can get you a lot of information right away to get you started off on the right foot. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, when it comes to your scores, don't settle for less, Settele for more.